Well, here we go again. So just around the corner is the long-awaited Security Breach DLC, Ruin. And as you may remember, I made a theory regarding Security Breach a while back, commenting on how nothing makes sense. Why is Springtrap back? Why is Fazbear Entertainment still kicking around? What the heck is this blob thing if all the spirits were free? Since then, though, we have received a lot of answers in the form of... the books. Yes, I know, the books. Oh frick, now I really have become MatPat. Now, I have never been the biggest fan of the books, mostly because they never seem to properly connect to the games, at least from where I've tried. But the new series, Tales from the Pizzaplex, is different, containing stories that seem a lot more one-to-one with the game continuity. So much so that the books have been actively changed to make sure they are one-to-one. To give one example, in Fazerblast, the staff bots were originally going to have alien designs. This was scrapped in the final release, and the books were edited to match. Combine that with the fact that there have been direct lore reveals like why there are generators in the daycare, and the bombshell that Gregory is in fact Patient 46, suddenly the books have my attention. Obviously that doesn't mean we should treat every story as game canon, but it does mean that we should start to look at them differently. Connect things where we can. This brings me to the biggest game changer in FNAF history, the story of the Mimic. Allow me to explain. The story begins with a man named Edwin. He was hired by Fazbear Entertainment to build animatronics for its many locations. He was always too busy to hang out with his son, David, so he pulled together some endoskeleton parts to entertain him. A top half endoskeleton running a program he named Mimic 1. The robot would mimic David's behavior, and even began carrying around a plush toy just like David always was. Tragically, David, who had gone without any real supervision, was hit by a car and died. While Edwin was racked with grief, the endoskeleton continued to mimic David, which angered Edwin to the point he ruthlessly began to bash the mimic's head in, with tears and drool flooding from his face. Remember that for later. Not only did it learn violence from this event, but Edwin's grief and rage had haunted the robot with a power known as agony. Edwin abandoned it at his factory, where it was later taken by Fazbear Entertainment. Fast forward to the Pizzaplex, the Mimic 1 AI shows up again as the Storyteller, a computer disguised as a giant baobab tree with wires that would spread through the entire Pizzaplex. The Storyteller was designed to replace Fazbear's creative team, generating the stories and personalities of the animatronics, so basically ChatGPT. However, it was a bit buggy and began to increase the animatronic's worst qualities, which is exactly what we see happen in the game. While the tree was later removed, it's implied that Patient 46 Gregory entered and made sure the program stuck around, as the animatronics have been hacked with signature G's and Y's everywhere. Where am I going with this? Well, the most widespread theory circulating right now is of course that this Mimic 1 program slash virus is Glitchtrap. And no, I don't mean in a parallel sense. I mean that the Glitchtrap we see in the games was never actually the spirit of William Afton, and actually just a program that mimicked him. And the reason I'm making this video today is because I can prove it. In the Princess Quest minigame, the door holding Glitchtrap has a mural above it, a baobab tree with a castle in front of it. And where was the Storyteller tree placed in the books? Right next to a castle. And it doesn't stop there. From the moment we meet Glitchtrap, we already hear it mimic.
Hello? Can you hear me?
And remember how I told you to remember those details about Edwin? His anger dissolved into regret, and the regret brought tears that he thought just might flow forever. The spittle that had shot from his mouth when he screamed at Mimic was now a froth that jetted from Edwin in great gushes. There is no reason these details would be present on William. This is Mimic, and has been the whole time. As much as people love to go, oh, they retconned it. No, the metadata of the books proves that they were written all the way back in 2019, when Help Wanted was initially released. And that's ignoring brainstorming, concepts, or early drafts, meaning they were probably planned out much further back. This also finally explains why Glitchtrap's voice isn't William's in the Security Breach trailer.
When I first found you, you were nothing. You were small, pathetic. But now, you are more. Are you ready?
Glitchtrap is mimicking someone to manipulate Vanessa, likely her manipulative father.
He manipulated you. It wasn't your fault. It's really sad. But it's common for one parent to use their child to hurt the other parent.
But that's just speculation. Now at this point, you're probably assuming that the Mimic circuit board was scanned into the VR game and are wondering why they would do that. But that's not what I believe happened here. What I'm about to show you will prove that the animatronic circuit boards were never scanned into the game at all, but rather something else. Hear me out. One of my biggest gripes with Help Wanted being canon is that so many of Mike's private experiences were so accurately recreated. We're talking the locations, the equipment, the activity, and the only explanation we got for that were these quote-unquote circuit boards. Tape Girl mentions receiving them specifically to help with pathfinding.
Said it would expedite the process so we wouldn't need to program any pathfinding ourselves.
Now, the way the community took this is that every animatronic from FNAF history was salvaged for their circuit boards and scanned into the game, which not only provided accurate pathfinding code, but brought Afton's spirit into the game. But that never made any sense to me. For example, we know that in FNAF 1, Bonnie goes left and Chica goes right. Bonnie stands in the closet, Chica rummages through the kitchen. These are very specific details that the VR team was able to replicate perfectly, and you're trying to tell me that the reason they were able to do that is because it said that on their circuit boards? That this whole time, the animatronics had code somewhere that was telling them to take these set paths. We know that's not true, as these same animatronics have been in multiple different buildings. They shouldn't have any pathfinding coded into them. They are free roaming.
They're left in some kind of free roaming mode at night.
That's not even mentioning the Phantom animatronics. I don't even want to know how you got those circuit boards. But Tape Girl isn't our only source here. When we listen to what Hand Unit has to say about it, we can interpret it in an entirely different light.
Using proprietary technology developed by Fazbear Entertainment, our VR development teams were able to use vintage control boards almost like plug and play, digitally recreating performances and personalities from the past in an instant.
What we can take from that is that Fazbear Entertainment had some kind of fancy technology that they fed details into and it spat out usable code. But notice what words he used instead of circuit boards. Vintage control boards. He is referring to the cameras. Think about it. FNAF 1, 2, and 3 have cameras. FNAF's sister location has cameras.
I'll open the faceplates for you. That way they can find you on the cameras.
Even FNAF 4 has cameras, but what FNAF game is without any cameras? FNAF 6, the only game not present in Help Wanted. All along, the most crucial detail for solving Help Wanted was this little red dot right here, all the way back in FNAF 1. They are recorded. This is why real-life events have been recreated so accurately. This is why the FNAF 4 bedroom has been recreated so accurately. It wasn't animatronic circuit boards. It was always the cameras. And it makes sense. The toy animatronics were scrapped. The FNAF 1 animatronics were bashed apart. Springtrap was burnt twice and then crushed. To imply that not one or two of these are still intact, but every single one of them? There's no way. But the camera control boards? Nothing ever happened to those things. They were just left there. They had recorded everything. And of course, cheap old Fazbear Entertainment doesn't just decide to monetize Mike's trauma. They used AI.
Using proprietary technology developed by Fazbear Entertainment,
This proprietary technology Fazbear Entertainment had, it's the Mimic 1 AI. They used photographed images of the offices, recorded footage of the buildings, and Mimic 1 created AI-generated code.
Said it would expedite the process so
But evidently, it did more than that. Obviously, the cameras weren't just recording 5 nights, which means Mimic 1 has witnessed events from those pizzerias that we ourselves haven't, hence the Spring Bonnie costume. And it also explains why Tape Girl's first encounter of Glitch Trap is in FNAF 1 of all places. It's simply mixing up events.
I saw it for the first time today. There was a character I couldn't make out who it was, standing at the end of the hall. I thought it was just bugged out, so I made a note of it and kept playing. But then it was looking in the window, and not like Chica or Bonnie would. It was like it was actually looking in the window, seeing what I was doing.
And suddenly Help Wanted's final level makes sense as well. A giant mess of random stuff thrown together. It's almost as if it's AI generated. By now, I firmly believe that I've proven that Glitch Trap is most definitely Mimic 1, a program that was fed all of FNAF's darkest history and told to recreate it. But the books don't only mention how Edwin's program was further utilized. The books also explain where the original Mimic endoskeleton ended up, and you'll never guess. At the end of each book is a single chapter of a larger story that spans across the ongoing series. And this story is about the remains of the FNAF 6 pizzeria. A bunch of construction workers are cleaning it out with the intention of turning it into a museum under the Pizzaplex, and they deployed the newly repaired Mimic to help them out, now with legs. However, it eventually gets violent and is locked down there. You might be able to see where I'm going with this, but there's one specific detail called out that nails this theory for me. The Mimic, still mimicking David, always has its arm curled as if it was holding a plushie to its chest. And what do we see Burntrap doing? And no, no, he's not just pushing open the door. When have you ever seen the charging station operating like that? It's an automatic sliding door. It doesn't even have a handle. And this would even make sense of the Freddy and Friends cartoons. Yeah, remember those? The cartoons that no one has even tried to decipher? Well, take a look at it now. The antagonist is revealed to be an endoskeleton and everybody is shocked. In fact, we basically see him mimic. They start running, Foxy is surprised, smiles, and then starts running too. In fact, in the one episode where they don't run, Foxy doesn't chase them. It's like he wasn't even trying to chase them at all. He was just mimic. Now I know what you're thinking. If Burn Trap is the mimic, where did it get all that flesh? I'll level with you. I don't know. The books are still ongoing. Future Arthur here. I actually do know. In the most recent addition to the story, a girl is hiding from the mimic inside of a suit. The mimic breaks itself apart and begins shoving itself into the suit, into her spine, and is now wearing her flesh. But yeah, back to the video. But even without direct confirmation, I am still quite certain that this is the mimic. How? Well, as I called out in my last theory, when we last saw Afton, he was missing an arm. Burn Trap here is not, and the most widely accepted theory was that he had just gotten a new one. That Vanny gave him a fancy new Glamrock arm. But upon further inspection, we were all stupid, because these arms are not the same in the slightest. And if none of that is doing it for you, I want to call attention back to the flesh tangled in the machinery. If this was a new arm that had been attached to Afton's corpse, why would there be flesh on it? For flesh to be tangled in this, the endo would have had to come first. Which brings me to what I personally think happened. In the story, a manual was eventually found documenting that the mimic endo was designed to fit into any suit. For a demented endoskeleton that was turned violent, would it be out of the question to believe it tried to wear a human corpse? Maybe this isn't even Afton's flesh. Maybe it's just one of the workers it killed earlier. Given everything we know, there's not a single other explanation I can think of that would explain how flesh ended up on this arm. And it's that part that's really funny to me. The FNAF community used to be super sleuths, counting buttons and teeth to distinguish designs. This arm alone should have been a massive clue that this is not who we thought it was, but FNAF has just gotten so absurd with all of its Fazgoo and Sea Bonnies that I'm betting you people thought the flesh just grew on the arm like vines. Because FNAF is absurd enough to do something like that. Heck, maybe the metal arm just formed out of pure remnant. FNAF would do that too. But hopefully what I've proven today is that a lot of things that seemed like FNAF nonsense actually had a logical answer. Where do I think FNAF is heading from here? Well, actually, I believe that we are in a completely new saga. Why? Well, in Dawko's interview with Scott, Scott makes it clear that for once, he is satisfied with the story. Every single game had something that bothered him, but not this time.
So, I think you just said that you were satisfied with the game, but are you satisfied with this possibly being the last game that you might create, the last FNAF game?
Yeah, I am. I really am. Starting with Five Nights at Freddy's 3, there was always something that I wasn't completely happy with, and that would become a core principle of the next game.
Yeah.
With 3, I wasn't completely happy with the jump scares, so I worked on 4. With 4, I wasn't completely happy with the storyline, so I made Sister Location. With Sister Location, I feel like it leaned a little too sci-fi and left a few plot points. Well, there were a few plot points that were really bothering people, so then I made Pizzeria Simulator. But then even with Pizzeria Simulator, even though I was really happy with the game, I don't know. I just felt like it needed a capstone. It needed some other bookend, just some experience. And in Ultima Custom Night brought in all of the characters,
And he concludes by mentioning he has begun working with Steel Wool and Illumix, and that he is only doing so because his story is wrapped up.
For the longest time, I wasn't willing to sign on with any companies because I was keeping the series too tight under wraps. I really wanted to be protective of the story. I didn't want other companies to come in and add characters. I didn't want other companies to come in and add storylines.
Yeah.
And I'm still holding on to that. My deals with them are very, very specific.
Which means, of course Afton's not back. Of course the Crying Child's not back. Of course Charlie's not back. None of them. Because that story is done. Now it's time for a new one. A new saga, taking place in the same universe, but with all new characters. The Mimic Saga. But hey, that's just a theory. A game theory.